to Transitions Lifestyle System. You're part of the self-guided program. My name is April Rashad, and I'm a Transitions Lifestyle Coach, and I'm going to be taking you through label reading today as we learn a little bit more about how to shop for and what to look for on labels as you go through the grocery store. I think for a lot of people when they do label reading, and which is one of my favorite classes to cover, but there's a lot that people really need to unlearn in terms of what they've learned in the past and what they actually look for. So that's my first question to you today, and to be honest, if you could grab any kind of item from your pantry, whether it be a cereal box or a bag of bread or wraps or any kind of snack food, really anything to help you to look at a label while we're doing this would be probably very helpful, and choosing something with a carbohydrate content would really be best so that you can kind of see what the elements are that we're looking for. Nowadays, every label has to be standardized, which actually makes it really easy for you to be able to understand the labels. So when you're at a grocery store and you do look at labels as you're shopping, what historically have been the components that grab your attention? That's the first question that I have for you. Because I think when I teach these classes, everybody has a different answer. Some people are really focused on calories, while other people look at fat grams. Some people look at fiber or sugar, some combination, some people look at ingredients, and it never ceases to amaze me how many people actually have such a varied type of thing that they're looking for. But then when I asked that second question was, well, then how do you make your choices on those elements that you're really kind of keying into? The faces kind of go blank. Usually the most common answer that I get is, well, I look at the two different products, and whichever one has more or less of what it is that I'm looking for, that's the one that I choose. So what we're going to do today is we're going to dispel some myths, and we're going to kind of teach you for transitions-worthy type food, how do you read a label to get to the foods that are going to be best for you. And the last question I have is, are you aware that most things that we eat when following a transitions program actually don't have a label? And the reason for that is that if you're following your food list and you're sticking with the low GI foods or you're sticking with the moderate to low GI foods, once you have a sense of what those are, whether they be black beans, whether they be chickpeas, whether it's a Barilla Plus pasta that you're having, or whatever it might be, you'll get those standard items that are in your pantry, and that's really what you're going to stick with. But remember, the majority of what we're eating are fruits, vegetables, right? They might even be sweet potatoes as one of your carbohydrates. They're going to be things like chicken and fish that, though those have a label, you know that these are good lean proteins or proteins with really good sources of fat in them. So you've become accustomed to that. Where we sort of get into trouble is when we start adding too many of the baked carbohydrate-rich food, which are all in really the middle section of the grocery store in terms of the aisles. And you would probably agree with me if you really think about it. So it's the processed food, it's the prepackaged food. These are the things that we have to be most concerned about with a label. Though I will say that there are some dairy products, and you'd be surprised at how much those really change as we're taking a look at this. So when we're done, hopefully you'll have a better idea, and you can always go back to your coach or go online at transitionslifestyle.com so that you can ask an expert for any further questions that you might have. So the components of a label are these. They're serving size, calories, protein, fat, carbohydrates, and ingredients. You'll see each one of these components with even some more indented categories in every single one of these at one point or another. So let's start with the first one, which is serving size, right at the top of your label. And I'm asking if you know that marketing has really a lot to do with labeling, because it does. It's really interesting, but if the hype right now is about omega-3 fatty acids, what you're going to see on everything, juice, bread, cereals, granola bars, whatever it is that you're in the grocery store looking at today, you're going to see has added omega-3s. For a while, we're really talking about calcium, and we want to fortify things with different nutrients and different vitamins. Now vitamin D is getting a lot of press. So now you're starting to see different foods that are supplemented with those as well. And while some of this can be good, a lot of this really, truly is a marketing strategy. So take a cereal box, for example. If fiber is all the hot topic right now, the cereal companies can do one of two things. They could change their ingredients to make sure something could legally be called a good or an excellent source of fiber, or they could do that, but typically what happens is they might actually change the serving size. It was really interesting when I showed one of my classes 2 different label packages for wraps that we could use, and it was the same exact company, and on one of them the serving size said half of a wrap, and on the other one the serving size said 1 full wrap. And what was the reason for that? Well, to get whatever they wanted to get for what the content of the wrap was going to be, they had to actually cut the serving size in half, so maybe it wouldn't have as many carbohydrates in it or whatever. So you have to be sort of careful because the marketing can be very tricky and the label can be very misleading. Most people do also underestimate how much they eat. So the serving size, while we're not counting, measuring, looking at points or anything like that, what I do think is really good for 1 or 2 weeks as you're in this program is to keep a couple of really basic measuring utensils out so that you can later be able to sort of eye your portions. We've told you that a serving size might be maybe the size of a deck of cards, you know, for a piece of chicken or fish. That's maybe 3 to 5 ounces, or maybe the size of the palm of your hand. But sometimes for a salad dressing, you could have 4 salad dressings in your refrigerator, and one of them, the serving size will be 1 tablespoon, the other one will be 2 tablespoons. You could have yogurt. One of them has a serving size of 1/4 cup, the other one has 1 full cup. So what I would ask people to do is to keep maybe a 1/2 cup, a 1 cup measuring, and maybe a half and like a teaspoon and a tablespoon, just in a little bowl on your counter just for 1 or 2 weeks so that you can actually start to measure. If you are having a high-fiber cereal or steel-cut oatmeal or whatever it is, actually stick to the serving size so that you could see what you would generally do and see how much of the serving you're actually eating. Because, of course, if you're eating 2 or 3 times the serving size, you have to multiply on the label 2 or 3 times the amount of whatever that quantity is that's in there. Now, calories. When eating a low GI diet, we do not count calories. You know, we really don't. According to studies, a person can actually eat more food and more calories that are low glycemic index and actually still lose weight, which we know is preferentially fat. However, it is helpful sometimes. You would be blown away to know how many calories are in certain types of foods. And we've done a class on eating out, and we've had people go ahead and download from 2 of my favorite websites. One of them is dietfacts.com, so it's dietfacts.com. The other one is calorieking.com. And sometimes people just generally go to their favorite restaurant. If it's a chain restaurant, they would have their own website. What we have them do is just go ahead and download what they might order, whether it be a spinach and artichoke dip appetizer or some boneless wing appetizer or a buffalo chicken, you know, salad or whatever it is that they order, and they are amazed at the amount of calories, of sodium, of fat, you know, that's in a lot of these dishes. The carbohydrate content, typically it's about 3 or 4 times the amount that you would want at least in one of your meals. So again, it's just helpful to be able to have some points of comparison, helpful to know that a piece of cheesecake around the holidays might have 1,400 calories because you might actually push it away if you knew that maybe you were eating a diet somewhere between, you know, 1,400 and 2,400 calories in a day, you know, depending on your size or whatever. To know that one piece of cheesecake is 1,400 calories might make you actually push it away and not have it. Or how about a 12-inch grinder from one of your favorite sandwich shops can have upwards of over 2,000 calories. It's unbelievable what the kind of content is in some of the foods that we eat today. So just to be aware of that. Now, a serving size of protein, I just kind of mentioned it, a deck of cards, the palm of your hand. You know, we don't, again, like to count grams necessarily, but about 15 to 25 grams per serving is about right. So for something like chicken or fish, you really don't have to count it. Do you know why? Because chicken and fish generally has somewhere around 25, you know, somewhere around 22 to 32 grams of protein per serving. If you're having a transition shake, it's got 18 grams of protein per serving, which is just perfect. The things to be aware of when it comes down to protein is to take a look at it. Again, if you look at a restaurant dish that you had that was a chicken parmesan dish, you might notice it has 90 grams of protein, but you say, huh, April told me that a piece of chicken might have about 25 grams of protein. What is that telling you? If it had 92 grams of protein in that chicken dish alone, maybe they're giving you 3 times the size of a portion that you really should eat. But the other thing to keep in mind is that typical breakfast foods that we eat in this country have less in terms of grams of protein per serving than other foods would, which is just really good to know. If you think about it this way, you know, you're not eating all night. So assuming whatever time you finished eating, if you finished eating dinner or whatever little after dinner snack that you might have had, you know, that you go all night without eating, and then when you start eating in the morning, what are the typical things that we eat for breakfast? Yogurt, eggs, turkey bacon, cottage cheese, different kinds of high-protein cereals that we know are okay for transitions. But each of these things, here's a few examples. Yogurt has about 7 grams of protein normally, eggs about 6. So here's some things you can do that can change that. For the yogurt, instead of going with one of the general brands of dairy yogurt, you could consider a Greek yogurt that might have somewhere between 18 and 22 grams of protein per serving. And if you're not getting the flavored kind, but you're flavoring it yourself with either some berries or with some agave or something like that, and by the way, I sometimes use transition shake, whether it's vanilla or chocolate, to flavor my yogurt and put berries in it, and it's delicious. But if you do that, you're going to get the right amount of protein that you need in the morning, so you're not starving your body of protein right first thing, which will, again, waste muscle, and we don't want to do that. With eggs, there's nothing wrong with a regular egg, but sometimes people like to have eggs every day, and there's not a whole lot of protein in each egg and an awful lot of fat and cholesterol. So what you consider doing maybe is having egg whites, because you could have 3 or 4 of them at 6 grams each. You're getting all the same amount of protein in the egg white versus the egg. But if you took 3 egg whites, you are getting the 18 grams. If you did 4, you're getting 24 grams of protein, and you're not getting all the fat and cholesterol. Something that people do if they don't love having the egg whites, which I get right out of a container so I can pour them, is they'll put 1 regular egg in with 2 or 3 different egg whites, and that way they get some of the fat and flavor and the coloring that they're used to with the regular egg, and they absolutely love it. So you might want to try that. So just keep these things in mind. There's nothing wrong with having a piece of fish in the morning. There's nothing wrong with having, you know, a little bit of this protein, but keep in mind if you only did have a little bit of a regular yogurt, you might want to consider having a protein-based snack sometime mid-morning so that you don't starve yourself of protein. Now, how much fat is desirable? If you look at your label, you're going to see that there's going to be total fat grams on there. And then you're usually going to see it indented. And what you're going to see are these different categories of this different kinds of fat that's on there. So in general, less is more for fat. You know, we do need fat. You can't actually lose fat. You can't actually function properly, and your brain can't function properly if we don't get a good amount of fat in our diet. We're probably wanting to get about 20% of fat, but we typically in this country eat so much excess fat, and it's hidden in a lot of foods we wouldn't realize it's there. So you might want to look for the things that you're looking at that actually have the label on it. You know, don't worry that salmon has more fat in it. Don't worry that your avocado has fat in it. And we're not looking at the labels of these wonderful natural foods. But, you know, you're looking for single digits maybe, somewhere between 1 and 5 grams of fat for the general amount of things that you'd be looking at a label. So as I said in the second bullet here, get your good fats from higher sources, higher fat sources like fish, avocado, nuts, seeds, and olive oil, and that's okay. Don't worry about the fact that they're higher in fat. These are good sources that if you're going to have just a little bit of them here and there throughout your diet during the day, it's awesome. And then keep your saturated fats low. When I said that they're going to indent the fat content on the label, they'll show you saturated fat, and they'll show you some different types of unsaturated fat. Polyunsaturated, monounsaturated. You want to keep the unsaturated fats as the ones that you're eating in your diet. So you definitely want to try to keep away from the saturated fats, the difference being saturated fats are solid at room temperature and unsaturated fats are not. So really the difference between butter sitting on the counter and olive oil would really be the difference between the saturated and the unsaturated fat. And we certainly want to stay away from trans fats because, of course, these are the most unhealthy for you. They're the most unhealthy for your figure, and they're the most unhealthy for your heart, for disease, and for your blood sugar. So you really need to stay away from things that are trans fat. What you should also be aware of, and you will have a handout in your packet that will show you, is what the government says or the FDA says that you can actually say on the label if you're a food company. And there are many companies that will say something is trans fat free right on the front of the package. But if you look in the ingredient list, you might see a word that says something like hydrogenated oil or partially hydrogenated oil or fractionated modified oil or something to that effect. The problem is those are trans fats, but if it's less than 0.5 grams per serving, they're allowed to say it's trans fat free. The problem, though, is that if you have enough of these types of foods that still have hydrogenated fats or trans fats in them in your cabinet, and you do over time end up consuming 2, 3, or 4 of them, they could be crackers, it could be cereals, it could be any types of foods like this. It could be different spreads that you use or dressings that you might use on your salads. Any of these things with these small amounts over the course of time are still going to add up, and they're incredibly unhealthy for your body, so you want to keep those out of the cabinets. Then you're going to get to carbohydrates. Now, again, this is important for you to take a look at a label so you understand how this works, and you are always able to go back and listen to this again to make sure that you do understand it. But for carbohydrates, you're going to see a total carbohydrate content, and then indented again, you'll see different types. You're going to see fiber, which is great. You're going to see sugar, which is not good. You're going to see sugar alcohols, which are okay in smaller amounts because they don't affect your blood sugar. But in larger amounts, they could give you some GI discomfort. And we also have to be aware that sugar alcohols are actually a source of an artificial sweetener, if you will. And that's sort of the effect that they have in the food. So anything that you consume that tastes sweet is going to actually train your body to look for more food and promote you trying to find food that is sweet. And then you're going to see something that might say other or miscellaneous carbohydrates. I put a question mark and an exclamation point because what the heck is that? It's everything else that would fit in the carbohydrate category in terms of ingredients but wouldn't be listed as a fiber, sugar, or sugar alcohol. Now, what's important about the carbohydrate content is what amount of these carbohydrates are going to have an effect on your blood sugar, because isn't the purpose of this program to be, keeping your blood sugar stable? So the way I try to let people know what net carbohydrates mean is that net means, if you think about your pay, gross pay and net pay. The gross pay is the amount, obviously, that you should have earned, but once they take out all of your taxes, what's the amount that actually affects your bank account? That's the net pay, correct? So it's the same thing with the carbohydrates. You have a total amount of carbohydrates, but we're going to teach you how to figure out the net amount of carbohydrates because those are the amount that you're actually concerned of whether or not they're actually going to affect your blood sugar by giving it some sort of a spike. So to figure it out, what you do is take the total carbohydrate content and then you subtract out fiber and sugar alcohol. How come? You subtract those two out because those are the only two things on that label under carbohydrates that will not affect your blood sugar negatively. So fiber, of course, we know is really good, and sugar alcohol, while kind of neither good or bad, is not at least going to affect your blood sugar. So here's an example. We have a cereal that has 20 total grams of carbs, and it might have 8 grams of sugar. Maybe it had 5 grams of sugar alcohols. It had 7 grams of fiber, and it had no miscellaneous carbohydrates. Okay? So in this example, now I have net carbs of a wrap. So let's say whether that was a wrap or a cereal or whatever it was, we'll take 20 grams. We'll subtract out the 5 grams of sugar alcohol and the 7 grams of fiber, right, because we're allowed to subtract those. And that leaves you with 8 grams of net carbs. Okay, so out of the total 20 carbohydrates, only 8 of them are actually going to affect your blood sugar. And kind of what you're looking for with the net carbohydrate content is sort of less is more. So in those single digits, again, is better, and then sometimes getting down lower is better as well. Now, the last segment of looking at the ingredients, looking at the label are the ingredients. And I guess these are sort of the questions that I ask. Are there too many ingredients? You could look at a can of Campbell's soup, and there's about 35 ingredients on there, the cup of soup or whatever. And I sit there and I say, gosh, I must be doing something wrong because when I make chicken soup, it only has 4 or 5 different ingredients in it. So that's one good clue that maybe that's not the purest, best food for you. And you're hearing, obviously, an awful lot of research now, too, on metal or tin, the aluminum cans that they're storing soups and beans, even if they're organic, and that there's different toxins that are being leached into those different foods. So you're better off getting soups from a box, you're better off getting things in glass jars, and you're better off getting types of foods that don't have too many ingredients in them because your body just won't know how to process them. How about things that you can't pronounce? If there's items on there that you can't pronounce, you might want to consider not, ingesting it into your body until you figure out what those things are. Things that you have no idea what they are, sometimes you can even Google them to find out, is this something that's really benign or not, or you can ask your transitions lifestyle coach. How about a variety of names of the same ingredients? Sometimes you'll get tricked. One time I looked at a Weight Watchers box of, there was shakes and there were bars. And, it's Weight Watchers, so of course they're so interested in maintaining people's weight, right? But 3 out of the first 5 ingredients on the ingredient list were other names for sugar. So it might have said sugar first, and then there was another ingredient, and then it would be molasses or rice syrup or evaporated cane juice. There's so many different names for sugar, and sometimes they'll use different types. And as you look through the ingredient list, you might find up to 5 or 6 different kinds of sugar. Now keep in mind, the first ingredient on the list, as you look at the ingredients, they list them from the highest content to the lowest. So, you know, if you're trying to stay away from artificial sweeteners or something, but you see sucralose is the very, very last ingredient, typically it's not going to be that much, just a little bit of a pinch of something that's at the end. And then, of course, as I said earlier, watch out for the trans fats that are hidden. So I hope that that helps you to find a little bit of balance when you watch the DVD series and you start to look at different types of grains and you start to really get into this program, understanding how to be able to look at a label and what exactly you're looking for, being the net carbohydrate content, being the higher fiber content, which I probably didn't mention, that over 4 grams of something in terms of fiber will actually offset some of the effects of the carbohydrates on your blood sugar. So while not everything with over 4 grams of fiber is great, that is a good start. When you're seeing things like pasta or something that have 2 or 3 grams of fiber, it's really just not enough to offset the effect of that carbohydrate on your blood sugar. But hopefully these are some little ideas that will help you to be able to navigate and negotiate the grocery store. We'll see you at the next self-guided program educational series. Thanks so much for joining us.